Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneurial grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your hosts.
Welcome to the Do Get X podcast. My name is Stephen Lewis, and I'm a catalyst for positive change in communities and businesses. And for over 2 decades, I have inspired leaders and entrepreneurs to live and work on purpose with intention, faith, and a commitment to their well-being. I'm delighted to be joined with my colleague, Kimberly Danielle. Hey, Kimberly.
Hi, Stephen, and hello to everyone who is tuning in. I am Kimberly Danielle, and I'm a communication strategist, a coach, and a community builder who comes from generations of faith-driven leaders and entrepreneurs who believe that our purpose should drive us all to contribute to the common good. So I am excited about our conversation today. As social entrepreneurs, we often focus on growth. We focus on customers, generating revenue, and our impact. But behind our work, every order, the product, the service, partnerships, there's some type of infrastructure and systems that are in place to help make these things happen. But when those systems or that infrastructure is unclear, maybe it's manual sometimes, or it's not really solid, it's a little shaky, our business operations, our growth and scaling can sometimes be slowed down. It can be stressful. It can be expensive. So, whether you are tuning in and you're running some type of startup, nonprofit, or some type of mission-driven business, your impact is really only as good as the systems that you have in place. Now, Stephen and I started a conversation a couple episodes ago about supply chain. And today we are going to dive more deeply into that with someone who is an expert in that area. So we are so grateful to have Charles Masters Rodriguez with us. Charles is a bilingual entrepreneur and Army veteran born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. He served 5 years in the U.S. Army as a captain and engineer dive officer at Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam, leading complex underwater engineering and recovery missions, which this includes a joint operation to recover and repatriate the remains of a Navy pilot missing since the Vietnam War. Those missions underscored the life or death importance of reliable equipment and resilient supply chains. After transitioning from military service, he bootstrapped MK3 Industries, a business-to-business wholesale distribution company serving enterprise clients like General Motors, Penske, Rivian, and J.B. Hunt. And he scaled the business to 7 figures. He is now the founder of Supply Veins, a venture-backed AI-powered supply chain technology company building the first unified supplier communication system to bring clarity, visibility, and intelligence to procurement workflows. Charles is also a dedicated veteran advocate and was named Young Entrepreneur of the Year by the Florida International University Small Business Development Center. There's way much more to Charles' bio. That is just like a little snippet of his full bio, everyone. But we are grateful to have you with us, Charles. Welcome.
No, honored and grateful to be here. Thank you, Kimberly and Stephen. Really excited to talk about this.
Yeah, supply chain is sometimes one of those things that a lot of founders don't necessarily think about deeply until something breaks or stops working or they run into some type of challenge. But your experience in the Army and as an entrepreneur has given you a unique lens to this work. So I'll just start our conversation there. And first of all, thank you for your service and all that you brought through your service in the Army. You led underwater recovery missions that were, you had to use some type of precision, I imagine, and a lot of preparation, which was critical. So can you just share with us what inspired you to transition into entrepreneurship from the Army, and what was the problem that you aim to solve through your business?
For sure. Yeah. So I started in the Army, going to West Point, studied engineering management. And then I got selected to become an Army engineer diver, as you said, stationed in Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam, Hawaii. Um, I led a 25-man dive team all across the Pacific. So we would deploy within 48 hours, anywhere in the world. Um, and the hardest part about my, position was not these crazy dive missions, but it was always sourcing commercial off-the-shelf parts for our commercial dive equipment, as well as parts for our military trucks that would help transport all that dive equipment. So that's the first time that I saw supply chain issues in the military. I got out in 2019, medically retired, and then that's where I started MK3 Industries. I bootstrapped that and scaled it to seven figures. And as I was doing that, I noticed I was dealing with this exact same problem that I had in the military and the commercial side. So it was really hard to, procure from all these different manufacturers, get used to all of their different systems, whether they had like ERPs or just manual POs via email. And I did that pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, and then tariffs, right? So I've seen it kind of change. So that's where I really got passionate about kind of like solving my biggest pain point. And then I noticed that a lot of people in the industry, other distributors, and especially manufacturers, suffered from this exact same problem. So that's where the concept of supply veins came in, and now we're scaling that.
For people who are listening in, Charles, and need some definitions, ERPs and POs, can you define what that means?
For sure. Yeah. So this is kind of part of it, right? Like supply chain, understanding the vernacular and the language. So POs meaning like purchase orders. So usually anything like that's done business to business, we call it a purchase order. And then ERPs are enterprise resource planning systems, and they're usually used more, as you scale within your supply chain. Think of ERPs as like a data housing storage where all of the different data for your suppliers, your POs, your purchase orders, and more finance and accounting for all that as well.
For founders who may not be familiar with the term, how do you define supply chain?
Yeah, so I define supply chain as your interconnected system of individuals, organizations, systems, technology that help you deliver the best product or service, in a very kind of simple term, but it's not simple at all.
And so then what are the core components of a healthy supply chain that every entrepreneur should understand?
Yeah, so I usually narrow it down to three things. So is your supply chain visible, right? So can you see it, right? Is it a black box, or are you tracking it, right? So that's the kind of first thing. If you can't see it, then you can't track it, right? The second thing is it measurable, right? So like once it's visible and you can start tracking it, right? Are you measuring it, right? How long is it taking for your suppliers to get back to you? What's your average purchase order volume for a given supplier? How many times are they coming back and saying, it's back ordered or something like that? And then the third thing, and I think the most important, is your supply chain reliable, right? Is it consistent? Especially given, the current conflicts around the world, as well as like the different parts and like tariffs and stuff like that coming on. It's really important to have a diversified and reliable supply chain so you can be consistent in providing the best product or service to your customers.
You talked a little bit about, having a healthy supply chain in the case of events that are going on in the world now, or, dealing with tariffs, what that looks like. But what changes or becomes complex or becomes more challenging in the supply chain if a business grows and scales?
Yeah, so that's really when, all of the weaknesses or the cracks within your supply chain start to show, right? So whether you're adding new systems or new suppliers, or you're onboarding new employees, right? All of that stuff starts to show. So for example, supply chain is a lot easier when you say you have like, three suppliers, right? And you're kind of like providing like let's say a single product, e-commerce store, right? That's usually a little bit more simple because you can only deal with those three suppliers, and there's no complexities to it. Now, if you think of a vehicle, right, and our main focus is automotive manufacturers. That's our wedge. There are 30,000 parts to a given like make, model, vehicle a year, right? And that changes every single year. So imagine the complexity that has to go through with the supply chain for the automotive space. Um, so that's what I would say. If you're adding other systems or you're making more complicated products or services, that's where the cracks start to show.
Well, so here's a question. Many founders focus on sales and visibility before their operations. So, how can entrepreneurs prepare early so that growth does not create chaos in their supply chain?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of founders, such as myself, right, especially like tech startup or distributors, like we're almost building the ladder as we're going. Um, so what's most important when you're building is having standard operating procedures, so SOPs, and then also tracking all of your workflows, right? So if I'm doing all the purchasing, if I'm a small business owner and I'm the one doing all the purchasing, which I've done, right? At first, it's just like, how do I just get this done? It's mostly like firefighting, right? Like dealing with things as they come, more reactive than proactively. But as you onboard a new employee, now you have to train that person on your system, right? And if you don't have a system recorded, right, that they can follow, then it's going to be impossible for someone else to come in and do that. And it works the same way with technology and automations. If you don't have a foundation for how you currently handle your supply chain, then there's no way, AI or any software is going to be able to replicate that for you.
That is a great bridge into my next question, which is about AI, given your business, given, just the state of where we are and the development and use of AI. Now, AI it can have real implications for a business, but where would you say it is genuinely, sorry, not generally, but maybe also generally, but genuinely transformative in the supply chain today?
Yeah. So really, again, like just touching on how important that foundation is of having your workflows and SOPs. And looking at the most atomic level, right? AI can actually help you translate what you do currently, right? Your workflows into like a standard operating procedure. So that's like one given like use case, right? The second use case is basically replicating or automating some of the manual processes that you use, within your startup or small business, in order to, one, automate that so it's easier for you and it's more consistent, but two, so you can kind of reallocate your resources. And for most, it's our time. So reallocating your time to other strategic things that will bring more revenue and cash flow to your business to continue scaling. Um, so, currently the way AI is evolving right now, it's evolving very quickly. There's a lot of AI tools now. You can, as a non-technical founder like myself, you can start learning Claude Code or Python, to start developing like AI agents to actually do this. But again, it always goes back to the foundation, right? If your workflow is actually not complete, or if it has a lot of extra steps, right, that are not necessary, then you're kind of doing a little bit more work than you should. And in the end, the AI and the technology that you bring into your system is only as powerful as your written workflows.
What operational foundations need to be in place before you even introduce AI to the supply chain? And the second part to that question would be, are there supply chain decisions that should never fully be automated?
Yeah. So given, I would say like the foundation of a business, right? Cash flow is the lifeblood of a company, right? And a startup. So that's one thing, right? When you run out of cash, whether that's, investment dollars for venture backed startups, or you're a small business and let's say you have inventory, you don't have enough capital to cover the inventory and the additional sales that you do, then AI is not going to help you do that, right? Unless they're actually getting implemented in the sales process, right? And increasing that cash flow. So really just like understanding your current operations and how everything works is important. The other thing is, I always come from a concept of lean, right? So, Lean Six Sigma, Black Belt, some of those certifications can help you understand what are best practices when currently like developing your workflows and processes, and how you reduce waste from the system, right? So if you have 10 steps to order from a supplier, but really it only takes 4 steps, right? Getting rid of those other 6 steps. And then once you have those 4 steps in place, then bringing automations will really help. So that's what I would answer for that question. The way we work as well when we start implementing these technologies, specifically with automotive manufacturers to start out with, is we need to understand how they operate. You could take two companies, two automotive manufacturers, let's say in Detroit, same place, same amount of employees, same vehicle they're working on, same everything, same amount of employees, same revenue, and they'll have completely different processes, right? So understanding the processes first. There's a lot of things like approvals, right? So how big the company is, sometimes approvals are required. So, we work with a lot of manufacturers that, let's say, like anything above $1,000 has to get approved by the operations manager, right? Or, anything above 3,000 has to get approved by one of the executives. So those types of processes, right, sometimes, are still not ready to be automated. The way we see things is we like to think of like Pareto's principle. So 80%, 20%, right? So if we can automate 80% of the manual workflows that will always be consistent, right? Then the 20% where the human in the loop can come in and just say, hey, approve. Like all of this looks good. Just approve this, right? You still want a human inside the system for now, especially given the current environment of small businesses and other mid-market enterprise companies. A lot of people see AI, and they kind of get scared, right? Because supply chain is a very important process, right? So a lot of people are. It's hard for them to kind of let go of that control. Similar to like an executive coming in and running purchasing for 5 years and then bringing on someone else and being like, okay, I have all the trust in you now, right? There's a trust factor to AI that you have to be okay with giving, right? The same way a trust factor you give with someone that you're onboarding as an employee, right? At first there's going to be some mistakes. At first it's going to they're going to learn, right? But eventually it could take 1 month, it could take 3 months. And again, it all depends on how good those workflows are documented. Eventually you have a system that's running very fluently and like very, I would say, reliable and consistent. And that's where you can start scaling it. But I still think that, that 20% of the human in the loop, being able to check what the technology has done and approving all of that is required for the time being.
So I know we've been focusing on supply chain, but you are also a founder who bootstrapped your first business, and you are from our conversation outside of this podcast, I know that you are the only person leading and working that business. So I'm really curious to hear from your journey of bootstrapping that and building it to a 7-figure business. What do you know now that you wish you would have known then when you first started that might be instructive for people who are listening in and they're bootstrapping, they're trying to build, and they're the only person on their team?
Coming from my experience, we didn't have any standard data operating procedures or workflows. Like I was kind of just firefighting most of the time, right? So setting those things up so that when someone comes in, they can look at the system and be like, okay, I can follow this is super important. The other thing is, as a founder, right? the whole reason why a lot of people start businesses, whether it's a small business or a tech venture backed startup, is we want to create value to the world, right? It's like a purpose to share value and create some type of impact, whether that's social or whether that's just bringing the best product or service to another company. It's hard to do that when it's just you, right? And it's also hard to do that when as a solo founder, there's a lot of times where you're just kind of alone. It's a lonely space when it's just by yourself. Um, it's a lot more rewarding when you're building out with a team, right? That you can kind of like share the vision, you can share the values, you can share the culture. So I would tell most people is, set that standard of how you operate currently, and you should always hire a little bit earlier than you think. Because once you're in a position where, like, let's say you get a big contract with an enterprise, or let's say you get an opportunity that is huge, that could change your business. If you don't have someone to help you in place, whether they're subcontract or whether they're internal in the company, you'll drop the ball and it could destroy your business, right? From and get rid of all the hard work that you put in throughout all the years.
When you think about the future of supply chains, where do you think the future is heading, and what do entrepreneurs may need to pay attention to now in preparation for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. In all honesty, I've been able to see the manual side of small business, and now being on the tech side, I see how fast technology is moving. Um, I'm one of those types of people that look at AI as like uh, a force multiplier, right? So for example, small businesses, it's inherently hard for us to compete with like your mid-market enterprise, right? It's inherently hard for us to like get a corporate contract, right? That maybe one of the big OEs, like OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, or any of these big corporations are getting. With AI, we'll actually be able to be much more competitive from the beginning. Um, so, thinking of AI and technology as a force multiplier and kind of leveling the playing field as you scale your business, I think that's the way people have to start seeing things. Um, the other thing I'll say is, you know, think of AI as just another intelligent human being that you're training up on your current systems, right? AI is able to read emails. It's able to create SOPs. It's able to follow up with vendors or follow up with your customers. It's able to give you a better product or service, which in the end, every small business or founder, that should be their goal, right? Can I develop? Can I provide the best product or service to our customers so that we continue scaling and growing? To eventually share that value with a team that you can bring on. Um, the last thing I'll say too is you really need to start understanding where your capital is going, right? So again, I started with saying like cash flow is the lifeblood of your company. Um, how do you free up your cash flow, right? So if you're an inventory based business, how do you keep less inventory on the warehouse ground, right? Are you able to do more of a just in time model like some of the best in the business, like Toyota? Um, those types of things are going to be really important. Um, and a lot of businesses sometimes think like, okay, I have this problem, or we're scaling, we need to bring on more people. And sometimes bringing on more people actually creates a hindrance to growing, right? Because again, now you have to, it's about those resources and time that you have. So now, me as a founder, I have to give time away from running the business and training other people to, scale the company with me. And that takes a lot of time and systems to be put in place to do that. Um, so we're gonna be seeing a lot more lean companies, um, running multi-million dollar companies scaling really really quickly with less than 15 to 20 people.
That's impressive. And well, it's exciting. If you've been listening to our conversation with Charles Rodriguez, I want you to know that we've been having a fascinating conversation around supply chain. And now we're going to move to our resource roundup, where we provide practical resources that can help founders build strong and sustainable businesses. So, Charles, let us ask you this question. If a founder listening today wants to assess the health of their supply chain, what are three diagnostic questions that they should be asking?
Yeah. So going back to, and I think I might have covered this. So going back to, are your operations or systems like visible, right? So can you see them? Are they there? Are they in a black box? If they are in a black box, like how do you bring them to the light so that you can track them? The second thing is, once you track them and they're visible, are they measurable, right? Can you measure how long it's taking for your suppliers to get back to you? How much spend are you spending with each one of your suppliers? Um, you know, how much are what are your unit economics, right? Supply chain is so vast, right? There's so many parts to it, but you really need to understand the fundamentals of each in order to make sure that your supply chain is healthy. And the third thing again is reliability. Is it reliable? Can you be consistent with it? Um, and then are you diversifying in order to be reliable? Right? Do you have three suppliers for one part of that product or that product in general? Right? Just in case something happens like global conflict or tariff changes, and it becomes more expensive for you to get that product in so that you can sell to others, because that will directly start affecting the bottom line and your net margins, right? You know, if you don't know your unit economics, um, and if you don't have that dialed in with your suppliers, then you might be running an unprofitable business. And you can't create value with an unprofitable business. We don't get in the I would say in the industry to run an unprofitable business. So those are the three things that I would really focus on starting out.
Yes. And Charles, again, for people who are trying to wrap their head around certain terminology, can you define what unit economics is?
Yes. Okay. So unit economics, it's interesting, right? But the simplest way is maybe with an example, right? This sweatshirt, right? So this probably cost, you know, this was probably a retailer that I bought it from. It cost maybe $10 for them to acquire this this sweatshirt, right, or this jacket, and then they had to embroider it, right? So that was another cost, right? And then they have to sell it for a profit, some type of profit, right? So maybe they sell it for 60 out the door, right? Is the difference from what that jacket cost you landed after the embroidery, is there a gap there where you can like take that and basically, consider that profit so that you can continue operating your business? And then is there a little bit extra after operations, right? Like, keeping the lights on and paying your employees in order to claim profit, right? Profit's super important. Um, Maybe not at first, right? Because you're just trying to get revenue. If you're going out the door, like if you're just starting, you just want to kind of like generate revenue, and break even is pretty good. But when you go out for a traditional loan, right, you need to have 2 years at least profitability showing. And that will depend how much capital you can get. And it's the same thing now for tech startups, right? It's a little different with tech startups. Like sometimes it's your growth rate. So like how fast are you growing? Uber was unprofitable for like 10 years, but they were growing at an astronomical rate, right? So they brought in investors and they could do that, always with the end goal of saying, once we get the most market share, we can become profitable. Um, so that's how I would kind of, define unit economics, I guess, with like more of an example.
No, that's great. That's great. And for you listeners, know your numbers. Know your numbers. I yes, know your numbers for various reasons. Profitability, being able to get investments, going out for a loan, all of these things, being prepared in your supply chain and knowing what costs you need to cut, what costs you can save, what costs you can afford to increase a little bit. Just know your numbers. All right, back to our regularly scheduled
Yeah.
program.
I'll
What?
add one last thing to that because you just did such a
Okay.
great job with that. You also need to know the basics of each like job. It's crazy because at first when I started the company, I did not like accounting or finance. I did not like it. I really didn't. But then I just realized like I had to know it. I had to know it, right? At least the basics, right? Because let's say my strong suit is like sales and product, and I love that stuff, right? But if I don't know the basics, how am I going to onboard another employee to run that, like a controller, right, or a CFO? Or
Mm,
how am I going to outsource that to a fractional? I still need to understand what they're telling me. And once you understand it, it's a beautiful thing because finances will actually tell you how healthy your business is, and it'll actually tell you where you need to focus on to continue growing and scaling your company.
absolutely. That's good. And I think that's especially important for solo founders. It's important for any founder. You should know what's going on in your business, even if you don't feel like you're skilled in it. Those are so important, but especially as a solo founder, know what you're talking about. And so Charles, for for people who are listening in and wanting to know a little bit more about systems or supply chains, what's one book or resource that really helped you to begin thinking more about this topic that can help listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say like the one book for supply chain in general is The Toyota Way, 14 Management Principles from the World's Greatest Manufacturer, by Jeffrey Liker, I think. So fantastic book. It goes into, basically the basis of how Toyota built their company and how they continue to be the best in the game, I would say. Um, they have two pillars. It's continuous improvement, and then it's respect for people, right? So that's what kind of develops that. They go into Kaizen, so continuous growth. They go into lean processes. So I would say a great book for wanting to one understand the systems and to improve them. The other book I would actually say, and this is more on a personal basis because you always have to continue growing as a founder. Because if you're not growing, your company's not growing, and then the people around you are not growing. And you can actually, relate this to supply chain as well. Atomic Habits by James Clear. One of my favorite books. I reread it every single year, but understanding what your current habits are, whether it's you personally or whether it's the person that's in charge of your supply chain, like a purchasing manager. What are the things that they're doing on a daily basis, and then how can you improve those habits, right? Like habit stacking, or tracking things. Like I think it's both those books are fantastic.
So, for veterans who are transitioning to entrepreneurship, what first step would you advise them or recommend that they take?
Yeah, so this is great as well. When I transitioned, I'm not gonna lie, like being in the military for so long, I kind of got disconnected with my tribe. I didn't want to know anything about the military. I just wanted to kind of live for a little bit. Uh, and I don't regret much, but like that I kind of regret. I eventually found my way back like 2 years later. But for veterans that are transitioning out of the military and then want to get into entrepreneurship, or startup, or even just want to like, the next career, I would say just reach out to your tribe. There are so many different networks and programs now to help you. Um, like the military veteran conference in San Francisco, if you're doing startup, the Institute of Veteran Military Families, Syracuse University, the Veteran Entrepreneurship Program, Penn Fed organization. Um, yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. that have some huge sponsors, right? There's a lot of companies like JP Morgan that are really pushing a lot of dollars to kind of help our veterans transition into a better space. Um, because if you think about like veterans that, their experience, one of the biggest things that, veterans are really good at is being resilient, right? And having that grit. And you have to have that as a founder. Um, so being able to kind of repurpose what you did in the military and still have purpose and bring value to the world when you get out is super important. And I think a lot of veterans transitioning, long for that, because sometimes we lose our way, but in the end, we all joined because we wanted to give back and be of service.
Thank you. And we'll be sure to put those resources in the show notes. And, I know we talked about a lot today: AI, supply chains. Uh, Charles has been so great at defining and giving examples to some phrases or terminology that you might have been like a deer in the headlight when you initially heard. And a lot of this can be overwhelming if you're building your business, especially as a solo founder. But know that you are not alone. There are so many communities out there and resources available to you. And we at Do Get X, we also support founders who want to build businesses that really create some type of meaningful impact. So we have programs in the community so that you're building together. You're not building alone and you're not burning out in the process. So if you're interested, you can visit dogetx.org and learn more there and explore how to get involved. We are going to move into our last segment of this episode, which is off the cuff. We have a series of questions that we are going to ask Charles. I said this in a previous episode. We ask for rapid pace answers off the dome, but we never really get rapid answers. So but we'll just go ahead and get started. So, Charles, what is one habit or practice that has made you a better entrepreneur?
Reading. I I read every single day. I wake up in the morning. I do my 10 minutes of meditation. I get my cup of coffee, and I pick up a book that helps me with what I'm struggling with for that week. Right now, it's marketing, so I'm reading like Ironclad, like building a really good brand. But reading is number one, and that's proven with data. So like some of the most successful founders and small business owners all have that trait is they read consistently.
What has been the greatest lesson so far in your entrepreneurial journey?
People. Um, Bringing on the right people is the most important decision that you'll make with your startup journey. I think that's why a lot of solo founders kind of stress out and take a little bit longer to bring on people. Um, but bringing on the right people is so important. If you bring on the wrong person that doesn't have the culture fit, that they don't have the purpose or passion, it's going to cause a lot of havoc for your business. But you bring on the right person, and you can 10x, 100x your business, hands down.
How has your faith shaped the way that you lead or build your businesses?
That's an important one. So, you know, me personally, like I was raised Catholic, but I'm the type of person that like, you know, I believe in the universe and doing good and creating value and just karma and that's why I do what I do, right? I wake up every single day and I get out of bed knowing that it's a new day and what happened the day before, whether it was a good day or a bad day, it's a new start. The sun comes up and comes down. Um, and I think, whatever religion you follow is going to be super important for your journey. Because this path we chose is one of the hardest paths you can take. Um, and the days that are really, really difficult, you have to have faith. You have to have faith in, your God, your religion, the people that surround you, and the systems that you create. Um, because you're going to go through some hard times. It's going to be that's a given fact too. I don't know a startup founder or small business owner that didn't go through some trials and tribulations as they were growing, whether they failed before and then started another one, or whether they started at one company.
What leadership trait was developed during your time in the Army that still inform how you lead today?
Curiosity. Um, that one in the military is usually not your first. It's usually they like the following side of things, which is an important trait too. You have to follow to lead. But I think curiosity is the number one trait that I was able to learn during my time. I had a little different experience because I manned a very special team of 25. Um, so I'm always curious about the people that I have on the team. Like, what are their stories? What are their backgrounds? Like, what keeps them up at night? Where do they come from? What have they seen? And it's the same thing for operations and systems. Whenever we go and visit a potential client, one of the automotive manufacturers that we start out with, we always visit them in person because we lead from curiosity. How do you currently do your workflows? Like, what's important to you? What is your biggest pain point? Whether it's yesterday or today. So curiosity for sure is my number one.
How much of your success do you attribute to your faith versus your own grit, will, and hustle?
I think they're both interlocked because you know faith is resilience, right? Faith is grit. So like having them interlocked together, I know that when my faith is intact and I know that I'm um, connected to my faith, my resilience and grit are above the roof, right? Because I know that whatever I encounter that day, or that month or that year, is something that I had to encounter to become a better leader and a better business owner. Um, so I would say that they're both hand in hand.
Complete this sentence. Because of my entrepreneurial endeavors, businesses and communities will be more able to do.
Hit above their weight limit. Uh, I just think because of the experiences that I've gone through, my team has gone through, because of the technology that we have, and because we have solved our own pain point, because we're so connected to our customers. Our biggest goal for them is they can start hitting above their weight limit when it comes to growth and scaling.
Thank you for your work, your contribution to the world, and what you're doing around supply chains and how you're helping other businesses. I think because of you, entrepreneurs are able to do what they're able to do. And so we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to share just a little bit of wisdom that you've gained in your entrepreneurial journey that can help someone along. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Charles.
No, thank y'all, Kimberly and Stephen. What y'all are doing is amazing too. I know that I've gone as far as I've gone because people like yourselves, share knowledge and information from others that have done it. And what you're doing is extremely valuable. And I hope everybody listening knows that that y'all are bringing so much value to the world. And hopefully we can all continue growing.
Absolutely. That's the goal. Continue to grow together. And we hope that you all have gained some wisdom, insight, a practical tip or resource that we'll list in the show notes from tuning into this conversation today with Charles. And hopefully you're looking at your supply chain a little differently. You're getting curious and embracing that as you refine and make your supply chain even stronger within your business. We hope that you continue to journey with us on the Do Good X podcast, and we look forward to our next episode with you. Until then, be well and do good.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.